Welcome to Empowered Kids TV and to our Fireside Talks this week. Every week we get together where we take our capes off and just feel the comfort of a non judgmental space where we've got guidance from amazing coaches from around the world. Tonight we're talking all about how to have constructive conversations. I used to say when I was growing up that my family didn't know how to have difficult conversations without the conflict. It wasn't because we wanted the conflict, we simply didn't have the tools to avoid it. So, tonight we're going to get some help on how we can have those important conversations in a loving and empowering way. Stay tuned. All right. If this is your first time with us, welcome to Fireside Talks. This is the place where we wrap our arms around you and give you lots of love. And be sure to find a way to take part within our community. You can ask questions live to our coach tonight. You can also join us on YouTube by subscribing to our channel or to our Facebook pages. Tonight, our guest is Elisabeth Stitt. And Elisabeth is an author, parent, educator, coach, and a retired school teacher. As a teacher for 25 years, she knows how little support parents have in today's society. Through her parenting coaching, she supports parents to create deeper connections as they guide their kids. Elisabeth believes that while parenting is hard work, it can also be a whole lot of fun. So, Elisabeth, welcome to Fireside Talks.
Welcome. Thank you. I appreciate being here.
Tell us why constructive conversations was a topic that piqued your interest.
Well, of the things that I teach parents, you can't go wrong teaching communication. At the end of the day, if we could all communicate with each other constructively and peacefully, think of the difference that it would make in the world. And as one of the things I love about it is that as we ourselves learn to have constructive conversations, we model that and we begin to teach our children how to have constructive conversations. And not only does that benefit at home with warmth and connection and harmony and peace and flow, but what a skill to be giving our kids as they go out into the world, as they need to approach their teachers, as they need to approach their coaches, their bosses, going up on through into adulthood. It's just such a no-brainer in some ways that, like, yes, if there's one thing that I could teach my child, it would be to be able to play well with others, right? Which means to be able to have a conversation where there's a disagreement, where there's some misunderstanding, where there's some problem, and to know that we can have this conversation and retain the relationship.
And I'll tell you why I'm looking forward to it. So I kind of alluded to it in the introduction to tonight's talk. But I think growing up, I simply wasn't aware that you can have difficult conversations without conflict because I had never seen it done. So it just equated to me that if you were going to have a difficult conversation, you needed to arm yourself and get ready for the conflict, right? And I have a lot of people in my family space that to today avoid difficult conversations because it's so ingrained in them that equates to conflict, and not conflict in a way that's healthy either, right? It's the tear you down, you feel drained after the conversation type of conflict. And so I'm excited for tonight because I think even if we could just give the gift of that paradigm shift, that it is possible to have difficult conversations in a way where we leave the relationship at the heart of it, where we walk away feeling uplifted and cared for, even though we had differences of opinions. That would be a gift for me.
Yes, and it's very possible.
Yes.
And you know, one of the reasons that it's so important is that when we are fearful of the conflict, we start running story in our head. And when we run story, we almost inevitably get it wrong.
Absolutely.
Right? We are kind of okay data collectors, but we're not great mind readers. And so we take all the data that's present and we arrange it into our own story, and that becomes our truth. And we continue to run the script with the other person, even if it's just in our own head.
Absolutely. And I think we plan. So, and I can share from my own experience because I grew up that way. When I knew I had a difficult conversation, I played the full conversation in my mind in the way that I was going to win, right? Because this was now a battle of wits and I was going to win. And it left no room for having that beautiful connection in a space where you can expand your perception because you're taking in what somebody else thinks and you're sharing what you think in a really respectful, loving way. So I'm going to pass the mic to you, I'm going to be taking notes because I'm
Good.
still on this journey of learning as we get some tips.
Wonderful. So the first step to not making assumptions is to not read minds, but to find out what is going on in the other person's mind. And a really great way to do that is active listening. A highly underutilized skill. And honestly, I tell my parents, I work with them, if you learn nothing else from me, if you learn how to listen actively, you're going to be you're going to be 90% of the way there, because we can't get in trouble when we listen actively. There's never going to be any harm in making the other person feel heard and seen and understood. So let's quickly review what active listening is. 1, we're going to make eye contact, or we're going to, sometimes we're on the phone, we can still do it. And often I close my eyes if I'm on the phone and I need to and I'm actively listening, because it's not just something that I need for the other person. I need to kind of get into that space myself. So if I'm on the phone, I'll close my eyes so that I'm coming inwards and I'm not getting distracted by everything going on out there. If I'm with you, or if I'm on Zoom, which is really hard, it's very hard because I'm trying to look at the picture and be present for you where the little green dot is. But we have to get good at that in today's society because a lot of our conversations are going to happen over Zoom. So eye contact, sort of mentally or physically, take that deep breath. That says to yourself, my only task right now is to be present and to listen. I don't have to judge, evaluate, critique, comment, problem solve. I don't have to do any of those things. All I have to do is sort of be here in my sort of Zen-like bowl, listening. I'm going to use head nods and prompts like to keep the speaker speaking and talking. And the other thing I'm going to use, and this is something to underline in your notes, Nicole, is silence. So I might start a conversation by making a guess. Maybe I'm saying something like, you're seeming really tense right now. And the story I'm telling myself, right? So might as well check in with what's the assumption. The story I'm telling myself is that I did something to upset you. And I'm just wondering what's going on. And then you let that silence extend for so much longer than you think. Like, it might be an excruciating amount of time for you to just be silent and to not say anything, especially if you're a talker and a fast talker like I am. So you let the silence extend. And usually that prompts people into conversation. It usually prompts them into going like, no, yes, whatever. But here's the truth. If you are part of the reason that the person is upset, just sitting there and allowing the silence, and even the hand on my cheek, from a psychological point of view, when we expose our neck, we are exposing ourselves. We are being vulnerable, right? You've seen a dog lie down when another dog is there. So we're literally saying, I'm here to listen. I'm not here to attack you. I'm here to listen. I'm not here to listen, right? It can be relaxed and back, but not arms crossed, because that says whatever you have to say, I'm going to deflect it, right? So open body, soft. I'm here to listen. You let that silence extend. So once people start talking, you keep them talking by going, uh-huh, mm-hmm. And if they pause, allow the silence, and then you might prompt with, what else? Or, that sounds really important. And notice how every time I say something, I let the silence land in between, right? So my number one goal here in my stance then is to give the message that I'm ready to listen. Okay. If you stay in the stance of listening, and my job right now is to mind for information because I am not a mind reader. So I'm just trying to find out what's the bottom of things and what the information is. That can bring up so much information that you hopefully will get to the key issue, right? Usually when people start talking, they start talking from the top. They start talking from like the surface issue, the very tip of the iceberg. And as you keep saying, what else? Uh-huh. That sounds important. Tell me more. They get deeper and deeper and deeper under the water until you get to what is the base issue. Okay. Let's say that active listening isn't bringing this forth. And so now you're sitting here with your assumptions and with your tight, tense, maybe angry feelings, frustrated feelings. I statements are a way to deliver your state of being and the effect that the other person is having on you with the minimum amount of agitation. So an I statement has 3 parts. It identifies the behavior that you were doing right now at this time that has me upset, how it makes me feel, and what the impact is on me. So, Nicole, when you arrived home 30 minutes late after the time that you said that you were going to be home for dinner, I was really angry and upset because I've put a lot of effort into dinner and I wanted it to be ready and on the table at a certain time. And now it's dried out. And again, I'm going to leave the pause because I want the other person to be able to digest that. Notice I'm calm. It's like literally I'm just putting it on the table. When you did this, this is how I felt because this is what was going on for me. That opens it up and allows the other person to probably come back with an apology. Like, I'm sorry, I didn't realize that dinner was such a tight thing tonight. Or, I'm sorry, I should have called you when I knew I was going to be late. Or, I'm sorry, I didn't know I was going to be late. Somebody called at the last minute and I really wanted to answer their one question. I should have called you as soon as I got in the car. It opens up the space for them to take ownership of what it, without having to be the bad guy. Like, oh yeah, that situation happened. Let's just pause for a moment and do a side. Let's imagine how it could have gone. I'm sitting here, dinner is ready. I wanted to serve it at 6 o'clock. It was already hot, piping out of the oven. It's now 6:30, and I hear you coming through the door, and you step into the kitchen, and I explode. And I'm like, how dare you? Where were you? You should have told me that you were going to be late. Okay, so what's the listener's response going to be? Whoop, right? They have to, just to preserve their own sense of self, they have to go on the defensive. Now, if they're extremely mature and have a great deal of equanimity, they might be able to come back with like, oh, you are really upset, aren't you? I really messed up. Tell me about it. If you're lucky, they're going to be that mature. And wouldn't that be great if we could do that with our kids? I was just helping a mom with her kid came to the door, slammed the door, threw the bookcase down, started yelling and screaming, and she's immediately screamed at him about, we don't close doors. That's not how we treat backpacks. How dare you walk into the house this way? And he stormed into his bedroom and closed the door and basically didn't come out for 3 days. And so we were doing a do-over. And I said, what would have happened if when he came through and slammed the door and threw the backpack on the floor and started raging about something, you had gone into, oh, what a hard day you've had. Tell me about it. And you had just brought your Zen-like calm in front of him, your absolute attentive, active listening. He would have probably stayed present, and it may have taken him a while. Like a 13-year-old needs a little time, right? It may take him a little while to come down off the ledge, but you would have been able to do that for him just by bringing it down a notch. So either technique, both techniques can work, right? One could be, whoa, when you walk through the door like that, it makes it hard for me to listen to you because you just sent my adrenaline up through the roof. I want to hear what you have to say. Could you calm down? Right. So active listening is super great for finding out what the other person is thinking. I statements are a good way of putting our feelings about the situation out on the table in a non-aggressive way. Neither one of these techniques necessarily moves us towards problem solving, because in active listening, all we're trying to do is really finding out what the situation is. With I statements, all we're doing is sharing our part of the story. Here's one of my favorite techniques, and it comes from the world of improvisation. In improv, the number one rule is to not stop the action of the scene. You want to keep it going. And that means that if somebody introduces an element to the scene, you can't negate it or just throw it out. You have to accept that they've just added a new piece to the reality of the scene. So let's say, for example, somebody says, it's awfully cold for the north side of Mars at this time of year. If you're the other player in the scene, you can't look and go like, dude, take your medicines. What is wrong with you? You have to assume that we are now Mars and it's cold. So you have to forward the action by agreeing something like, yes, it is certainly cold in Mars at this time of year. And then you can shift the focus of the scene with something else. So you might say, yes, it certainly is cold for Mars at this time of year. And at the same time, I can't worry about that because we've got to get the laser working before the droids come. So we've acknowledged the reality and we've brought the other player along with us by acknowledging a new reality. Okay, so in families, I call it the yes, 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 and at the same time technique. So anytime somebody comes at you with anything and your first reaction is like, no, I don't want to, like, that's not going to work. You start with what you can agree on. So let's say Tommy comes in and he's like, Mom, I get to sleep over at Johnny's house tonight. It's gonna be great. And you're thinking, no, you're not sleeping at Johnny's house. A, you didn't ask me. B, we have to go to your grandmother's for dinner. That's not happening. So instead, you go, oh, yes, you were invited to Johnny's house tonight to sleep over, and you're excited about that. And then he says, yes, and Johnny has a snap circuit set, and I am so excited. It has 300 pieces. And so you go, wow, you really want to see Johnny's snap circuit set. It has 300 pieces. I imagine that you could do something pretty marvelous with 300 pieces. Yes, and Mrs. Thompson is serving ice cream with brownies for dessert. Oh, and you love ice cream and brownies for dessert. I hear how excited you are, and now this is where we shift. And at the same time, we promised Grandma we were going to dinner at her house tonight. Now, your child will probably come out and go, but Mom, I want to go to Johnny's. It's not fair. I never get invited to Johnny's house. And you're going to come back with, I know you really want to go to Johnny's and you're so excited about it and it feels so good to be asked. And I know they don't often have enough free nights to have you over. I know, yes. And at the same time, we promised Grandma we were coming for dinner tonight. But I want to go to Johnny's. Yes, you want to go to Johnny's. And Grandma is counting on seeing you. She is so excited. She is as excited about seeing you, I think. I can't know for sure, but I think she's excited as about seeing you as you are about going to Johnny's. She wants to hear all about what's going on with you. Okay, so in this way, we go forward with the scene. We've allowed a lot of space for our child to get excited about something. We've agreed with all the good parts about it. And bit by bit, we have tenaciously held them to the idea that we have this other commitment. So that's how it might work with a child. With a spouse, I'm going to give you the 1-minute version for a spouse. Let's go to Hawaii for vacation this year. Yes, Hawaii is beautiful. Yes, we could have fancy dinners and pina coladas with those little umbrellas. Oh, you know how I love those umbrellas. They're so cute. Yes, and we could stroll along the beach. Oh, I would love some romantic time with you. And at the same time, I'm worried about the cost of going to Hawaii. But Hawaii is great, and they've got great deals going right now. They do. They have great deals. I love hearing that. And at the same time, I'm worried about the cost of the airplane. So you just go back and forth. Eventually, you get the key information. Like, let's say, you find out, like, what are all the great things about Hawaii? And because you have been being positive and agreeing and very gently putting your truth on the table, tenaciously, but gently, you are then in a position where you're able to say, I hear you really would love to go to Hawaii. What I'm hearing about that is that you want to walk on the beach and you want to eat good food and you want to have some romantic moments. And I want all that too. And I think we could find that somewhere closer to home without an airplane flight. Could we brainstorm some places? And we're now in a place where we have lots of information on the table, like we know what's really important, and lots of goodwill because I've been doing a lot of agreeing. And we've got the crux of the problem, which is the cost, and we want to find a solution for that or something else. Okay, so active listening for finding out what's in somebody's head. I statements for speaking our truth even when it feels hard and we're emotional, and using the yes and the same time technique to move the conversation towards a win-win solution. That's it. Those are my tips.
Those are some amazing tips. You can't just say, that's it. You have to say, and there it is. Ta-da! There's so much juice in that. Okay, I'm just trying to get my questions in order because I'm all excited about all the things that came up for me. So let's go back to the very beginning of active listening, because all of the other steps need to follow the ability to do that one, or at least the willingness to do that one. And what I think trips, having had the journey of moving from that place of I don't know how to have difficult conversations without the rah-rah and the conflict, to now where I think I'm in a good place, still learning and getting better, but definitely in a much better place than I was growing up. what I knew tripped me up in the very beginning was I couldn't actively listen because I wanted to be right. And what you were saying was absolutely opposite of what I was thinking. So I couldn't hear you because I was busy in my mind working out what I was going to say as my rebuttal. How do we move on from that place?
I mean, recognition is a really excellent place to start, Nicole. Congratulations. I'm really proud of you. So I have a few. So if you're the speaker and you're wanting to be listened to, I have a trick which works with my husband. Maybe it will work with yours too. And that's this. I'm upset about something and I want to share. And I know that if I bring it up while I'm upset, he's going to completely go on the defensive and he's going to shut down. So the trick that I've learned is this. I come to him and I say, I have something that's been on my mind and I've really been thinking about it and it's got me upset and I want to share it with you, but honestly, I don't want to talk about it right now. So if I could just tell you how I'm feeling, and I'm sorry, but I'm going to get emotional when I say this, husband dear, if you could just be okay with that, I'll blow my nose afterwards. It will be okay. And then could we talk about it later, maybe? And so he always says yes, usually like this.
Because he knows it's coming.
Right? But I've set the scene and I've set the parameter. And so now I can say it. And just having said that usually allows me to bring the emotion down and to be able to just state what my truth is a little bit more calmly. Might be a series of I statements, right? When this happened, this is, and I'll tell my story. And I use language like saying, you know, when you did this, it made me feel that because that, and the story I told myself about that was. And when I call it a story, I'm putting the framework around it that I'm not telling you that this is the truth. I'm not telling you that this is what was going on in your mind because I'm not a mind reader. All I'm telling you is that this is what my head was spinning towards. And so I get it all out and then I'll just be like, so if we could think about that and find a solution for that, that would be great. Thank you for listening. And then I usually say, and I need a hug now. And he knows. Like, so what have I taken away? I've taken away the need for him to be right or wrong. I've taken away the need for him to solve a problem. I have watched my language in terms of using an I statement. Yes, this action of yours made me feel this way because this is what I'm telling myself about it. But I'm not saying, you did this and you know, I'm not making broad generalizations. You always do this. You never think about me. You know, you don't respect me, right? I'm not mind reading. I'm just putting it out there. And in doing it that way, not once in 20 years has he come back to me and said, you know, when you were talking about, I'm ready to talk about that now. Not once. And at the same time, I always see some shift in behavior or something. Or he'll come up with an idea as if it was his idea 100%. You know, and he'll be like, you know, I was thinking what we ought to do is this. And of course my brain flips to like, yeah, that's what I said. But I just go, oh,
it's a great idea.
It's a great plan. I like that idea. You know, I think you're right.
You know what I love about that? It's so soft and it sets the scene for us to put aside our defensiveness because nobody feels like somebody's coming at them. Like there's no charging lion coming to attack you. And I remembered when I started learning about what it would take to do active listening in a really effective way. And I looked at where active listening was critical. So I looked at what was done on suicidal hotlines. What was
Hmm.
done by FBI negotiators while they were negotiating with terrorists and hostage takers, like, and all of it, surprisingly, even though very different in terms of circumstances, were exactly the same. The same thing they do on the suicidal hotline, the FBI negotiators do. They reach in and say, I want to see your world. They don't have a judgment that you are a psychopath because you're a terrorist. They leave all the judgments away and they say, I just want to see your world. And from their perspective, especially when we go to the FBI negotiations, it was ingrained in them that in order for me to meet you halfway where we could have a switch, I have to let you know 100% that I understand your world.
Yeah.
And so that was the job. My job was I have to listen enough to show you that I understood your world. And I realized in my own journey that I was getting tripped up on my triggers and I couldn't get to that point. And I had to make it almost like a game with myself. So, how many times are you going to win at the game of understanding the other person's world?
There you
And
go.
that gave me something else to focus on so much more than my triggers, that it allowed me to kind of stay steady through the conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. And for me, it's that image of that iceberg, right?
Mm.
That image of the iceberg that says, there's still something here I don't get because you're wrong. Like, I'm still like, you're wrong. Like, you're right. And I mean, hopefully we're going from the point of view of you have a person with rights to feelings and to a world, and I'm a person with rights to my feelings and to my world. And you have as much right to your feelings as I have to mine. So my job right now is to find out what that is. Like, I love that. I want to see your world. And I did forget to say in listing steps for active listening, I did forget the recap or the gist.
Yes.
And that can be a very useful piece. And especially if we're not good listeners, like if we're spinning away into story or into judgment or into critique or into problem solving, what can bring us back is to say, Nicole, let me see if I got that right.
Yeah.
What you're saying is da 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 da.
And for parents at the beginning of the journey, this was not a flip of the switch. And I had to give myself mantras. Because my default mode was just jump in and fix it. Right. So if my kids are having a little bit of an argument, jump in and fix it. And so I'm like, So now I had to say to myself, it's not time for the solution. It's not time for the solution. It's not. So it's just time to listen.
Yeah.
It's just time to listen. But over time, and it's not as much time as you think you need. It's really just about breaking the habit that you had of the way you've communicated, because you communicated that way for a long time.
Yeah.
And just breaking that habit with some mantras and just understanding what's required in the process was enough for me to start to at least analyze, so I could walk away from a conversation and I usually score myself 1 to 10. So how well did I do in terms of listening?
That's too funny.
You can tell I need little actionable steps to keep moving along.
I love it. Yes.
So I want to also touch on the I statements, because for me, this was another big step change within our family dynamic, where the I statements was, and we had this conversation first as a family so that we can all really understand what was involved in the I statement.
Yep.
And it was really about saying, and this is how I set it up for my kids, you have a particular power that you should never give to anyone else. And that power is about what happens inside here. So if you take your power and you say, you made me feel, you're taking your power and you're giving it all the way to somebody else. And my kids are very much like me, where they're like, no, nobody's going to take my power from me.
Yeah.
And so it was easy then to see, because it became very visual, that to stay I statements is really to own your own story. What's happening in here? What's happening in here? And how is it showing up in your body in the ways that you want to react? Whether you're asking for help, for understanding, for comfort, but you can own all of it. And I think that really, really made a big difference for us to sink deeper into those I statements.
And making an ask at the end of an I statement is another good piece.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
right? You did this, it made me feel, because Nicole, would you next time please call if you're going to be late?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And the juicy piece was the yes, yes, yes. So this was the
Yeah.
real juicy piece for me. So when I was doing the research of suicidal hotlines and the FBI negotiators, and I also did research on how powerful leaders across the world communicated. Again, a very similar thread all the way through. And this for me was surprising. They all recognized that the solution could contain the parts of everyone's idea. It didn't have to be my idea versus your idea. It didn't have to be I give some up of my idea and you give some up of your idea. But the way you described it when you were giving us the example of saying yes, especially the Hawaii, you can see it really clearly with the Hawaii. As you said yes and yes and yes, you moved from the top of I want to go to Hawaii all the way down to the bottom of I want to spend some time with you, alone time. I want to have some relaxation time. I want to have some romantic time. And those were the real key things.
Right.
And then when you get there, it's really easier to be able to have a solution that incorporates everyone's needs. Because now I can say, I want to have that too, but maybe not at this cost. How can we have it?
Yeah.
And no one feels like they have to give up. And I remember hearing it was a powerful leader, and he was talking about his relationship with his wife. And he said, the only thing they do not do at all in their communication is compromise.
Interesting.
And that's what that yes, yes felt like for me. It felt like, yes, you can have what you want. Yes, I can have what you want. I want. Yes, we can work it out together. And so I love the energy of that. I love the non sort of verbal communication that message brings. Because even when you were doing the example, I knew that you were saying and we have to focus on this, but I still felt safe in that yes space.
Yeah, and I love the little neuro-linguistic programming piece there. I mean, but is just from a phonemic point of view, right? You have two plosives, but and to. That but.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's like literally like whereas, and at the same time, right? It just flows us into the next idea. And it allows for two truths to sit side by side.
Yeah.
Hawaii is all of these things. And at the same time, there are other ways that we could be romantic and connected and relaxing and having good meals. Yeah.
And the difference is, like, I can quickly see if you started with Hawaii's too expensive. Now I'm attached to Hawaii. I'm no longer thinking about walks on the beaches, romantic time, relaxation. I'm just attached to Hawaii. I want to go to Hawaii, and it's Hawaii we need to go. And that's just because now you've kind of boxed me into a corner where I have to feel like I have to defend my idea,
right,
as opposed to that open space.
Right. Or the defense goes on, you're so cheap.
Yes.
You're so cheap. All you ever think about is money. All you ever worry about, you know, right? So let's, yeah.
I love it. These were some fantastic tips. Even for somebody who's been practicing for a long time, I feel like I had a refresher.
I know, we need the reminders, don't we?
We need a reminder. I'm excited to go have my goodnight conversation with my kids just so I can score myself again tonight.
Are they as competitive as you are?
As competitive as I am. But it's healthy competition. I compete with myself because and I say this to my kids all the time, my real goal is just to do a little better every day in all the key areas that matter to me. I'm not trying to move from 1 to 60 in 10 seconds flat, because I know that's unrealistic. But if I can do just a little better, like if I can put my head on the pillow and go, I did that better today, that's a win. that's a win. And I think that's really important, just to keep nudging our families forward in the direction that we want to go, especially knowing that a lot of us have come from very disconnected places, and so there's a gap to close. Yeah. um the last thing I'd say about all of this was that I think what families could take away is that this does not have to be anything less than fun. Like,
Yeah.
you can have fun doing this.
Yeah.
You can have fun learning, you can have fun getting better at it. You can have fun just with the journey of being able to understand each other's worldview, how we all see the world, and what that would mean in terms of enriching the dynamic within a family. So thank you so much for sharing,
Yes.
Elizabeth.
It was great fun.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much. I want to say again, remember, this is a weekly show. So if this is your first time with us, be sure to subscribe, whether you're on Facebook or on YouTube right now, so that you get access to all of our upcoming episodes. Until next time, Empowerers. Thank you for joining us for this episode. We're all about sharing and supporting this village. So if you found value in this episode, be sure to share it with your family and friends. And remember, this is a weekly show. So if you haven't already, subscribe and hit that bell icon so that you'll be notified of our next episode. As we always say in the village, you're just one connection away. With love and gratitude, Empowerers. Until next time.